today on Ag News Daily.
You got to have the right fertilizer. You got to have it in the right place. You got to have it in the right time. And probably the most important thing is the right form. The form of that fertilizer is so important if you want that plant to take it up.
Welcome back to the Ag News Daily Report, our weekly edition, and we always kick it off with some weather, Delaney.
We certainly do. You didn't have a script to open us up today. You almost...
I almost forgot. That's exactly right. But I've got some guidance right here. There's been some much-needed rain that fell across the Midwest this past week, which was great news. Several storm systems are bringing even more precipitation, with an active weather pattern expected to continue through the middle of next week. While drought has been increasing overall the last few months, this rainfall could help ease those conditions in some areas. The 5-day rainfall totals are projected to reach more than 1 to 2 inches from the southern plains all the way to the upper Great Lakes. Eric Snodgrass did tell AgWeb that the big story this winter will be whether there is enough moisture and if it arrives in time to counter the growing drought considerations. Moderate to severe drought has been expanded across much of Minnesota, Missouri, Illinois, parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa, and Indiana. Those abnormally dry conditions have also spread in southern Illinois, eastern Missouri, and parts of western Kentucky. That's the weather update this week. We will continue to give you a reminder that the last day of the meteorological big word. Fall is November 30th, so we're already halfway through that season. And daylight savings time.
I was just going to say we fall back. I love this one.
That's right.
Getting an extra hour of sleep there. But I know, Tanner, you mentioned deer not quite done, but harvest is well beyond the halfway point as this year's dry weather has helped farmers at a rapid pace. Across the nation, 81% of the corn crop has been harvested, up from 16% last week, and ahead of the 5-year average of 64% complete. 89% of the soybean crop has been harvested, up 8% from last week, way beyond the 5-year average of 78%. Tanner, so we're done. I know you're not quite done yet, but I think a lot of growers in this central Iowa area really are wrapping things up.
Yeah, a lot of tillage being done. I think there's a lot of patience being exercised on anhydrous application because our ground temps are still well above 50 degrees. We did see the first detection of the H5N1 swine coming from a confirmed Oregon case. The veterinarians and USDA investigators found a positive case in backyard farming operation in Oregon that houses a mix of poultry, livestock, including swine. October 25th, those state officials announced that first detection of H5N1 in poultry on that farm. Then on Tuesday's October 29th meeting, the National Veterinary Service Laboratories confirmed that one of the farm's 5 pigs had also tested positive for H5N1. The infected pig, along with 2 others that had tested negative and 2 results that came pending, were also euthanized. 70 birds were euthanized on that farm where the livestock poultry share a water and housing and equipment. The non-commercial operation stated that there is no concern regarding the safety of the national pork supply, but keeping a close eye on this, the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service announced plans to enhance their testing now and monitoring of H5N1. In collaboration with state veterinarians, the USDA will implement a tiered strategy to collect these samples, including milk, to better assess the presence of that virus. The effort aims to improve biosecurity and produce containment measures that will be state-led initiatives to reduce the risk to farm workers.
And that's definitely going to be one the pork industry watches, as that's a big one for the pork industry. Well, we're going to continue to update you on the situation involving 3 states and the poultry processing company, Pure Prairie Poultry. In early October, the company's financial difficulties left many producers without feed for their birds and contract growers unpaid. While Minnesota and Wisconsin lacked the legal authority to intervene, Iowa's Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship has stepped in, obtaining a court order to take control of the birds and address the situation. Earlier this week, iDolls announced that it euthanized approximately 1.3 million broiler chickens, a process that concluded on Friday, October 25th. The agency struggled to find a buyer for these birds despite reaching out to other processors on the market. Due to the broiler industry structure, large processors have limited capacity to take on additional birds from the open market, the state explained. At one point, Iowa secured an offer from Tyson Foods to purchase these birds, according to court records reviewed by the Charles City Press. However, that deal fell through after creditors of the processing plant threatened legal action to claim a share of Tyson's profits. So the USDA told Progressive Farmer earlier this month that it is actively investigating that situation as it continues to unfold. In a recent press release, the Iowa Department of Agriculture stated it is pursuing all available options to recover taxpayer costs from the responsible parties, potentially through legal action. This remains an unfortunate situation for those contract growers across those three Midwestern states, and many questions still remain unanswered, like growers in Minnesota and Wisconsin. Will they be paid for those birds, Tanner?
Yeah, that was the first, as you started reading that article, the thought that came to my mind was the producers. Mm-hmm. Also, a lot of focus around the election. Political action committees sponsored by farm organizations, agribusiness firms, and electric cooperatives have contributed approximately $26.7 million to congressional campaigns in this 24 election cycle. According to the data compiled by the Center for Responsive Politics and analyzed by AgriPulse, about 66% of those contributions came from 262 ag and food-related PACs that have now gone the direction of Republicans. The stakes are high for agriculture and rural businesses on November 5th, given that this presidential election and ongoing development of a new farm bill and uncertainty surrounding U.S. trade policy. These PACs are also focused on the expiration of key provisions from the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that will end at the end of 2025. Among those top contributors to the PAC are the National Rural Electrical Cooperative Association. They've donated nearly $1.8 million. The American Crystal Sugars PAC, which has contributed $2.4 million. The National Cattle Beef Association, their PAC, with just shy of $900,000 in contributions. The polls are open next week. We'll continue to monitor those headlines that are relevant to agriculture and rural interests, but make sure you get out and vote.
That's right. It's coming right up. But the United States isn't the only country closely watching the upcoming presidential election. Many other nations are eager to see who they'll be working with for the next 4 years. This election not only affects foreign relations, but could also shape the future of the global trade climate altogether. With the U.S. currently running a trade deficit, the incoming president will have to address these economic challenges. According to Gru McBride, a commodity broker with Allendale, he says that we're seeing a little uptick right now in grain purchases ahead of that pending election. He stated that if President Trump is reelected, tariffs might be imposed to balance out some of those trade relationships. On the livestock side, there's less concern about international trade implications, but more focus on how domestic protein demand will shape up pending that potential election results. So we'll see how things go.
That's right. We are also watching the USDA. They announced that they're going to issue a $235 million to farmers that are affected by natural disasters. This includes $143 million in crop insurance indemnities for Florida and areas impacted by Hurricane Milton through Hurricane Insurance Protection Wind Index. In total, over $750 million in payments have been issued under this program in 2024. Additionally, another $92 million will go to livestock producers nationwide who increased their supplemental feed costs due to forage losses from qualifying droughts and wildfires since 2022. This is the second round of payments through the Emergency Livestock Relief Program, so we'll continue to watch that as well.
Well, in other livestock-related news, the USDA's final rule mandating electronic identification tags for certain cattle and bison will officially take effect on November 5th. Announced earlier this year, the rule updates a 2013 requirement by transitioning from visual ID tags to EID tags for all sexually intact cattle and bison aged 18 months or older. In a letter to U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack, North Dakota Senator Kevin Cramer expressed concerns from ranchers in his state. He noted that according to the state's veterinarian, North Dakota faces a shortage of nearly 175,000 EID tags, which could cost vets approximately $500,000. Senator Kramer also emphasized that without support from the USDA's APHIS, or Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, North Dakota ranchers are being burdened with an unfunded mandate on top of historically high input costs. But that does go into effect nonetheless November 5th.
We also saw recent reports indicate that ag companies like Cargill and Bunge are slowing their soybean purchases due to uncertainty around the U.S.'s biofuel policy. According to the Farm Policy News, some producers are delaying purchases of soy oil for early next year, which is now dampening the demand for soybeans. However, by mid-November, most fuel retailers had only secured about 10% of their biodiesel feedstocks for the first quarter of 2025. This is compared to more than 80% by this time in previous years. The industry is awaiting guidance from the Treasury Department on the Clean Fuel Production Credit, set to take effect in January. Producers are hesitant to commit to a large soybean oil purchase until this guidance has been issued. The industry insiders are warning that if the Treasury does not release regulations on the 45Z production credit soon, a 45 million gallon per year biodiesel plant in Northwest Iowa may have to idle its operations. So there's some big impacts coming from that one area of clarification, Delaney.
Tanner, I almost asked you earlier, maybe I should have asked you who you're voting for this election, but I won't put you on the spot to do that.
I don't think it's any secret as far as those goes. But we did see last Friday a recent investment aimed at boosting export competitiveness was announced that the Federal Railroad Administration awarded $26 million to the Port of Kalama in Washington for rail expansion and for that project at the Tacoma Export Market Company. The soybean and grain export terminal there is a joint venture between Cargill and CHS. It's expanding its rail unloading and staging infrastructure to reduce significant delays caused by limited trackage. The project will add 25,000 linear feet of rail track to improve that staging of loaded and unloaded trains. The port estimates that this investment will boost their efficiency by 25 to 30%, particularly from October to January, this peak export season for soybeans. According to Mike Steenhoek, the executive director of Soy Transportation Coalition, will be much beneficial. In a report that he sent, he stated that there are two motivations for soybean farmers and organizations to provide funding for this project. One was to provide meaningful investment into a project that will enhance the soybean exports, and the other is for the port to be able to highlight the funding commitment from farmer organizations, which would enhance the viability and competitiveness of their grant application.
Tanner, I think Michelle, she doesn't like you. She gave you lots of headlines to read today.
I know, she's really testing me. But how was your Halloween?
Yeah, I didn't do anything, didn't dress up, no kids, so didn't go trick-or-treating. What about you?
Oh, we just walked around the neighborhood. I didn't make it near as far as the kids did.
Well, it is the season for pumpkins, even though Halloween is over, whether you're carving them, roasting them, or enjoying pumpkin pie. In 2023, Illinois led the nation in pumpkin production, followed by Indiana, Pennsylvania, California, Michigan, and Washington, according to the USDA. Illinois harvests the largest share of pumpkin acreage, especially for processing purposes. Nearly 70% of the state's pumpkin acres are used for varieties destined for pie filling and other processed products, compared to just 3% in Pennsylvania and even less in other states. So you'll probably be eating an Illinois pumpkin if you're enjoying pumpkin pie this season. But in 2023, farmers in those top states harvested over 1.2 billion pounds of pumpkins, and we'll see how much they harvest this year for us to enjoy this holiday season.
That's right. And our interview to share with you today is coming from Redstar out at Husker Harvest Days in Nebraska. We're going to dive into that interview right now and share that conversation with you here.
All right, listeners, I just learned of a new fertilizer recommendation method that I'm going to call it the Corey method. We're going to discuss that a little bit here with our friends from Redstar and dive into what we need to be thinking about for next year as far as our fertility plan goes. So let's just quick for listeners, now that they've met you once before, remind them who you are and what your role is within Redstar. Start with you, Tom.
Yep, Tom Stanton, head of Redstar Branded Fertilizer out of Lee, Nebraska.
I'm John Person. I'm an agronomist. Been walking cornfields for since '79. So,
Coltin Schachtner, sales agronomist.
All right, gentlemen, thanks for joining me again. We're still hanging out here at Husker Harvest Days, and we're not done sharing some great information and tips with the listeners. I'm excited because we always try to plan in advance. Every time I come to one of these trade shows, we're setting up a schedule. We're trying to set up meetings. We're planning in advance, even talking about what we can do next year. Farmers are doing the same this fall as they go through their field, thinking about what they're going to do for fertilizer. We teased them a little bit about how you guys are going about assessing the needs this fall. What is that, Tom? You talked about soil testing. We're also going to use some new technology that's available. Explain and expand upon that.
Yeah, again, we're going to continue to look at traditional soil testing like's been done for years. And now in the fall of 24, we're going to do a lot of stuff with biological testing. A lot of people know that as the Haney test. And then we're also getting into a lot of DNA testing. DNA testing has gotten lower cost over time, and what that's going to do for us, it's going to allow us to give us basically what's our bacteria, fungi in the soil, what's the ratio, are they balanced, are they not balanced. It's going to allow us to go through and say, hey, where's my corn rootworm pressure and where isn't it? It's going to help us be more efficient with insecticide usage. And as we take a look at it, it's going to really help us on what we're seeing as a big issue in Nebraska anyway, and that is, where do we have fungus in the soil? Fusarium, Phytophthora, those things that we use seed treatments for, but evidently the seed treatments aren't quite enough if your pressure's high enough to cover those. And so that testing is what we're going to get into and try to help our customers do a better job of managing every acre.
I like that because we can't forget about every acre, whether it's, grandma's 80 or it's the 80 that you're renting down the road. All of the acres matter, and especially in central Iowa where we had potholes that were going to yield 0 this year. We know that that's a huge effect. If it's yielding 0 because of our nutrient plan, we've got a bigger problem than just excess moisture. But I teased it in the intro. John mentioned here before we started chatting that there is a scientific way about going about your fertilizer plan, and not just to do more on. I heard you say that as moron, which is why I called it the Corey method. But you meant don't just put more on your field. That's not always the answer.
That's correct. We have to balance our soil. Everything in our bodies, in our lawns, in our life, the soil, we just need a balance. And once we can get that balance, whether it be base saturations, fungi, bacteria, the balance of nitrates to water uptake. Nature was made to work perfectly, and we kind of mess it up a lot of times by putting more on. But that balance is probably the most important part, and we could work on the soil, then we work towards balancing the plant.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're seeing kind of the same things that you advise the clients in your area.
Yep, definitely. Our nutrient ratios, those are some of the most important things to look at. I mean, Northwest Iowa, there's a lot of hog manure. Phosphorus is not our limiting nutrient. So let's look at some other nutrients like zinc or sulfur. Make sure we got those in proper relationships. And the best way to do that is with a Haney test. And I know guys look at a Haney test and they go, oh my God, that's $65 a test. Well, you're not doing it on 2.5 acre grid. One Haney can probably cover 40 acres. So it is tough to read the first time you look at it because it is completely different. But once you understand it, you realize it's a lot better way of testing because it's measuring what the plant can see. It uses a citric acid. I've been told it tastes like Tang. I haven't tried it myself. Instead of using a harsh chemical.
Next time we do a recording, you are tasting it live.
Hey, Tang and Tito's, I'm up for that.
Shake it up.
There we go. Yeah, but once you get over that hurdle of understanding the test, especially in season, you'll never want to go back to the basic grid sampling.
Yeah, and that is the future, is we're no longer going to deal with information that is longer or not readily available to us. We're going to be able to start making decisions with data at the tips of our fingers. And I know that it's kind of neat. We had a couple of conversations, learned about that technology that's available. But you guys have said it before. The 4 R's also matter. Explain to those listeners that missed the first time that we talked about this, what are the 4 R's?
Yeah, it's, we look at it, we call it 5 R's at Redstar, but you got to have the right fertilizer, You got to have it in the right place. You got to have it in the right time. And probably the most important thing is the right form. The form of that fertilizer is so important if you want that plant to take it up, right? We don't want to put something out. An example, just a quick example that's kind of for the Midwest. If I put elemental sulfur on, okay, it's not going to be available for 12 to 15 months. That's just the way that it is. So if I put on something like ATS or ammonium sulfate, it's available now. And so that's why the form is so important.
But it's still only 4 hours.
I know. The fifth one, you got to have Redstar.
Sorry, John, I interrupted.
No. But in the same comment, the elemental sulfur, if you're after trying to move magnesium out of the soil, that's a much better fit than the sulfate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is fascinating because you guys cover such a wide territory, but yet it's not that big of a territory. When you think about the scope of agriculture, this matters across the country, no matter what crop you're growing. And it's ultimately one of the most valuable things a farmer can do is understand what they've already got, and one of the most precious assets they have is in their soil. Being able to put that together, what are some ways that Redstar has been working with farmers that set yourself apart when understanding what you already have?
Yeah, so one thing we've been doing is coming up with new formulations for different products. For example, in Nebraska, there's a lot of fertigation, and in Iowa, there's a lot of Y drop. Well, traditionally, we've used 32%. Well, what no one tells you is 32% is technically half nitrate, half ammoniacal. When you apply it, that ammoniacal is converted to nitrate. Well, nitrate takes 30% of that plant's daily energy to convert from nitrate to ammoniacal. So if we can apply an ammoniacal source and get around that and save the energy, we're going to be a lot better for our growers.
I don't know if I've heard anybody share that yet.
And not only that, if you take less nitrate causes becomes excess in the plant. As like our bodies, if we have too much excess of something, it's not good for us. It can cause diseases.
Right. Like diseases is not true, but the excess of Redstar beer, you might wake up with a headache at least in the morning.
You might. You probably will, actually. Yes. But no, you guys are right. And what we're trying to do, Tanner, is we're trying to build fertilizer formulations that are right for the plant at the right time. And Finish Line was really one of those products where it's completely 100% ammoniacal nitrogen, completely protected, so it wouldn't break down for 3 to 4 weeks. And so that plant at that time can just pull it in and utilize it. Okay. Whereas with nitrate, it's got to strip the oxygen, it's got to add the hydrogen back, and then it can utilize it. And so that's kind of what Redstar is about, is building and developing products that are more efficient for the grower.
Yeah, I'm sure this year your test plots where you applied that and had controls are going to yield for you quite well.
Definitely.
Yeah, especially in a year just like this.
Hope so. We'll see. We'll see where the cookie crumbles, as they say.
And in a year like next year, it could become financially beneficial with savings of fertility.
That's right, because this might not be a moron year for a lot of the listeners, because this is a year to where maybe we think we're going to cut back just due to the sheer dollars and cents side of things. What do you guys have to say to a theory about I can't put on what I usually do?
You know, I think it's important that you go back and look at your soil tests, and you're going to have to do this on each piece of ground that you've got. Because you're going to have some that you own that you might have been doing a really good job in taking care of it. And maybe you can. I'm not saying that's the right thing, but maybe you can.
Sure.
And on the rented ground where, things are a little tighter, there it's going to be harder. And that's where we talk about all the time is how can we change that? Well, maybe we go from broadcasting to banding. Maybe we can band that fertilizer strip till. Maybe we can band it with the planter. If I can get that fertilizer and get it closer to the plant, to the root, where it's going to pull it up, it's going to be more efficient.
Right.
And it's going to help me have a higher yield. And higher yields in low commodity price situations are going to help, pay the bank back.
That's right. Paying attention to, if you've been doing 1.some% or 1.1 times, 1.5 times removal rate, and building up that bank in your soils, this might be the time to where you make a withdrawal.
It might be. Yep. But again, you really got to take a hard look at each farm and each field to make sure that, what your yield goal is, what that plant's going to take based on the crop you plant. If it's in the soil, you can get by with it.
Is that something Redstar helps with? Making decisions around what you've got in your soil, looking at those?
Yeah.
Yep.
when we're building farm plans, that's the first thing, especially I ask for, is I want to see your soil tests before I tell you any recommendation. I want to know what you have there because I can make the perfect plan. And if the soil was wrong, well, that's a very bad plan.
Yep. The cookie cutter approach is not efficient. Yep. And if we can not do the cookie cutter, look at each field individually, you can be more efficient on those fields. And
so if we've got a listener interested in an individualized plan, how best do they contact you guys at Redstar?
Really the best way, www.redstarne.com is the best way to get a hold of anybody at Redstar.
Oh, great. I appreciate that, and I'm glad that our listeners got to pick your brains here virtually, and hopefully they reach out and ask you some good questions on their own.
Yep, thanks for the time, Tanner. Appreciate it.
Well, it's always great to catch up with those folks, and they share some really great insights as to your planning for 2025. But what is happening in markets this week, Delaney?
Well, as we wrapped up this month of October, traders were looking to square up some positions. So we didn't see any huge moves this week as we head into Friday's session, but we did enter the first notice date for November soybean futures. Soybeans neared their contract low this week with news of potential tariffs post-election, but that did spur some buying to happen as well, which gave futures a little bit of a bump off of those lows. Corn futures this week saw a pretty quiet week to wrap up the month as well. And we saw the average close for December corn futures throughout October was $4.16, which is the fall crop insurance price. That is 50 cents below the base that was set back in February. For the next few weeks, we are certainly going to remain focused on how the U.S. elections will play out and what that could mean for trade, domestic biofuel demand, and other agricultural specific issues, according to Angie Setzer that she shared in her morning commentary this week. So just a few more weeks, well, just one more week and we'll know our president, but how that impacts the rest of the agricultural economy will be yet to be determined.
Yeah, that's right. It will be certainly an election to watch just all across the board. But we appreciate you sticking with us for your news and headlines. We'll be back again next Friday with a fresh set of headlines for you as well. Don't forget, you can watch clips throughout the week daily on our Instagram and other social media channels as well. But for today, what do you say, Delaney? Should we let the listeners go?
Let's let them go.